All right, it looks like Ash mentioned that he won't be here until a little bit later. Looks like time. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and go ahead and get started here. I don't have a ton of specific agenda items for today. Want to talk just briefly. 921 is out there. Overall, I'm seeing positive commentary on the release. Is there any concerns amongst the people in this group with that release, things that we need to be aware of? I know there has been a bit of a conversation around release notes and some messaging, which I'm still working to converse with Ash about fixing that for the next release. But any other concerns, thoughts with regards to 921? All right, well, that's good. 922, as we've discussed, code freeze for 922 is looking at this Friday. Is this plan still, with a release candidate to be published on Monday? Oliver, with the CI pipeline and everything else, we're good to go with those dates still, correct?
Yeah, we should be.
Okay. And then
the only packages that we're not creating at the moment are the symbol packages. But besides that, everything should be there.
Okay. All right. And Tomas, any update on getting DNN Corp switched over to consuming our builds? Has that happened yet?
No, it hasn't happened yet. So I was asking Oliver some questions, but yeah, haven't had a chance yet to get down to it. So Oliver, once again, because I don't think I got a straight answer, what I would need is to be able to get the very latest build of whatever. So that's probably easy, right, to get from Visual Studio Team Services. But especially for like release candidate, when we now will have two branches building, is there any way to be getting, like, pinning a certain version, right, so that the release, the 922 will not be getting 923 build of platform?
I'm not fully following the question there.
Okay, so what I mean is that when we build on CI, there will be a stream of builds coming from development or master.
Yep.
So once we go with the release candidate, we'll have a separate release branch, and so these will be 922 builds. And the same will happen for Evoke, where I'd want 923 builds coming from development of platform to feed into the next version, and the release candidate to be using the 922 builds of platform. Can we have those separated somehow?
Yeah, no, all we will need to do is just clone our build pipeline and set up one off of development and set up one off of our release branch.
Oh, all right. Well, this is something similar to what DNN Corp has been doing and what we are doing, and well, that's okay. Well, this will do.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think we once we do that, then anything that gets merged into, like if a bug fix comes in to that during the release candidate process, we would have the automated build there ready to go, and then we can just sunset that release definition or build definition. That shouldn't be a problem at all.
Not a problem, but in the long run, this approach does not scale very well.
Yeah, it's something that we definitely need to address. I think going forward for 9.3, I think right now we've got everything functional for the 9.2.2 build, and then it's going to be a continuous improvement through each of the upcoming releases. We've got variables in the build script to control what branches and what tags we're pulling down for Persona Bar and for CK Editor and CDF. All that's probably going to change after we switch over to publish and consume either NuGet packages or consuming the actual GitHub release. So there's going to be a lot of things that will change throughout the releases, and hopefully the final set of tasks will be something where, we'll have maybe a tag that we assign to a branch, and then it'll just automatically kick off a new build and release and set of artifacts without having to manually clone and reconfigure a couple tasks.
Yeah, well, for me, I will just be downloading over HTTP, right? So if I can just get a stable URL, which will give me the latest build of 9.2 and then a separate URL for whatever latest build of 9.3, that's good enough for now.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can. Oliver, let's chat a little bit about that. I think we might be able to add a second regular living branch out there that would help us alleviate this. This is what we've done in other environments, and use a tagging strategy after that. We can. Let's chat after this meeting if you have a couple minutes.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so then with 9.3, we've got a number of fixes in 9.3 already. It looks like we've got some persona bar improvements that have came in. We have some performance improvements, a bunch of other little things. Is there anything from the community that any of you are working on that is anticipated to come in between now and Friday that we don't already have in the radar? All right. So with that, we'll plan to get the release candidate published, as soon as we can after the code freeze, working with DNN Corp to make sure that the QA cycle is being done off of our generated build rather than being generated off of the other builds that have been used in the past. For this release, that's a hard stop on getting this release out the door. So if we're not able to get that work completed before the release candidate date on Monday, from my perspective, we don't continue with that release until that transition has happened. That's been what we have said all along. I wouldn't want to slip on the dates, but at the same time, I really don't want to coordinate another release that's a part us, part somebody else release. I think it makes it more confusing for everybody, especially after the some of the stuff that we went through last release. So just, we'll keep that in mind. We'll have a solid update for that with next week's meeting, and anything that we can do, to help make sure that that transition gets over there is imperative for keeping things on track for 9.2.2. 9.3 then is the next thing I had on my list of conversations. So we have a number of items for 9.3 already with some minor changes that will get merged in sooner rather than later. We also, for the 9.3 release, do need to take a look at improving the dependencies that we have for various libraries, as we've talked about a couple of times in prior meetings. Is there anyone on this call that has the availability once we get truly started on the 9.3 cycle to help get those dependencies managed and updated, especially in the persona bar area, to at least the latest minor revision? I
can try to help with some of the persona bar stuff.
Okay, that would be great, Matt.
I suppose we could. I'm not fully up to speed with that stuff, but there are services like I've seen Renovate, which you add as an app to a GitHub, and it sends you pull requests with updates.
Yeah, I've used Greenkeeper for
Yeah,
and-
I've seen that one too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if anybody has some experience with that, there's definitely a need to keep things more current. I mean, we still need the grant, we still need the control of being able to, approve it as a pull request, right? We don't want to do it as an automated build task or something like that that moves it forward. But anything that we can do to be more on the spot with this will be great, especially for 9.3. There's a number of dependencies that we do need to resolve on the 9.3 release. And I've got a list of those. So whoever has some time, at minimum, I've got a list of ones that we need to update with some details as to why, and then we can, adjust from there. Otherwise, with 9.3, we're looking to try to hopefully ramp up the community involvement more with the 9.3 release. We've had a lot of community effort in 9.2.1, 9.2.2. A lot of that's been less visible to the community, if you will, because all of the work that we do with automated tasks and back-end processes are not necessarily seen by the community. They're not line items in the release notes. They're not anything that others can understand greatly. So anything that you guys have out there for 9.3 would be great. Sebastian, do we have any update on GDPR?
Okay, I'm unmuted, sorry. No, not at the moment due to vacation time in Europe. We have the next meeting in 2 weeks, I think.
Okay. All righty. All right. Well, so with that, just anything that we have that we can do moving forward with 9.3 or later is stuff that I want to make sure that we start talking about early in a manner of trying to manage everybody's time involvement. The more planning we can have ahead of time to be able to incorporate things into the process, then I think we'll be looking better. The only other item that I had then is just an update regarding the merging of the persona bar. That merging process of the repositories has been done. The homepage of the DNN software GitHub had been updated with the pinned repositories. I think there's a secondary update with the pinned repository to repin the React common based on a request. Should be taken care of most likely later today. With that in mind, that I think should hopefully make things a lot easier for all of the stuff to be done. I know Daniel isn't on here right now, but I know that he was working on his video tutorial, and hopefully that will be ready to go sooner rather than later. Here. Let me play with is my audio better now? For those of you commenting that it was coming in and out.
Sounds better, but it like slowly creeps up and down as you're talking. I mean,
well,
it
hopefully
sounded
this
right there. It's just you'll have to wait until I guess you're talking more to really know for sure.
All right. Well, hopefully that works a little bit better. Zoom sucks. All right. So I don't have a lot else in terms of action items for today. We have some other conversations that are going on right now in relation to accessibility, which I think really warrants a lot more research. There's some other stuff there. Aside from getting the job done with 9.2.2 and 9.3, do we have anything else that we want to be chatting about now? I know at some point we've had conversations in the past. For example, Peter, I know you were talking about working on some API changes. There's some larger scale changes for 10x But I don't necessarily think those are pressing top of mind matters that we need to dive into today.
No, I think that's okay.
I know in the Slack channel, Ernst brought up some persona bar UI UX changes or improvements. I think they started a new Slack channel for that.
Is that in the technology group, or is that in?
That was the discussion was started in MVP forums, and Will Stroll suggested that we move it to the GDPR to this group, and so I copied it over and created a new channel which is called. It's
called admin experience.
Admin experience.
Okay. Yes, I think there's a lot on the admin experience side that I really think that we need to do. So the long and short of it, I guess, right now of what I know, I don't know how many of you on the call right now have spent a lot of time working with accessibility, but I've spent quite a bit recently, and it's been fun. So back in the day, we weren't great from an edit experience in terms of people with screen readers, but they were able to at least navigate the site. With the persona bar, they can't do anything, period. Nothing. And it appears that the design concepts of accessibility in terms of labels and naming and other things, that all of that stuff has not been considered at all. So from my thoughts here, we have some usability stuff with the persona bar that we really need to take care of. And we have really two key experience scenarios that I've heard mentioned as problems. This accessibility for those that are using screen readers or other assistive technologies is one. The other being the concept that you can't administer a DNN site anymore from a tablet or mobile device is a secondary concern. So I do believe that we need to figure out exactly what we need to do. And I think that just looking through the comments here of creating a group focused on a direction for the persona bar is exactly what we need to do.
Mitch, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
The two items that you mentioned are only technical aspects in my viewpoint. They're talking about accessibility for other people, and you're talking about using tablets. But in my perspective, the whole user experience of the persona bar is false. It even is so false for me that we will not upgrade any DNN8 site because the persona bar is not working. Technically it's working, but it's as a user experience, it's horrible. At least I think. That's my experience. That's my idea.
Okay, can you be more specific? So,
for example, having a bar on the left side, whereas HTML is more vertically oriented. It shifts the screen. Having to edit a page, you have to have something in the bottom left. There's a pencil. Then you have some buttons on the left side that has something to do with modules. If you want to close, it's on the right side in the bottom. If you want to close, let's say, a admin panel, it's somewhere on the right top. It floats over your screen from the left side out. It messes up my normal display. So it's all kind of things, how things work, which is, for me, pretty difficult to work with. And I think there are more people around who think that the way the current persona bar is working let's put it politely, is not optimal for user experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot to. There's a lot to be said around where we need to go. In the end, right? It was at the top, everybody hated it. Now it's on the left, everybody hates it. If we put it on the bottom, everybody hated it. We put it in the middle, it wouldn't be usable. So there is a piece of it, right, that I want to be careful that we really look at what's there. Coming in from the side, it overlays the top. So there is definitely some certain things from a
It would help if the persona bar is not at the left side, but they get the top in a fixed row, so the rest of the page is scrolled down, but your persona, the control panel or persona bar on the top stays in place. That would make life a little bit easier. Now everything, if you scroll down your page, everything scrolls at the left side or not.
But
That's
then
my experience.
Header,
Yeah.
But then header editing is atrocious.
Yeah.
And fixed bottoms are atrocious. There's a certain bit here where I want to make sure that we're being careful here, that we don't want to shoot the whole thing in the foot and throw it out.
No.
Because there's a lot of effort here. The design concepts, whether we like them or not, are design concepts that are becoming more and more standard. If you go look at the Azure portal, if you look
again, Azure portal is not for end users. It's not for website administrators. It's for technical people. So I'm really looking for something that can be used by ignorant CMS administrators. If I'm lucky, they have a little bit of SEO knowledge, but that's about it.
Now,
So I'm not
Right.
looking at the technical development guys.
Mitch, if I just may, I think it would be really valuable to have a team look at it, because it is the single most controversial thing that has been introduced to DNN over the past couple of years. We're getting a lot, I have to say, a lot of really violent feedback from the community about it. What I'd like to see is actually just a rundown of pros and cons of different solutions that we might have, that we can make a more informed decision, rather than kind of just bounce it around and say, well, we don't like. If you understand, I think this needs a thorough investigation.
now I do have another perspective here, because our company started with Evoke, and so we always had as content managers on the left side, and our CMS managers have no problems with that. I did have to give one of them admin rights to do some things with users, and then that moved everything to the top, and then they were super confused because it's just not what they were used to. So some of this is just what people start out with and what they're used to. Like I have no problems with the persona bar except when I have to do something on mobile.
Yeah, I would say that, and that's going to be the big thing here, is that we really need to look at the persona bar more holistically, because I have the same experience. I have the opposite experience that most of you that are being vocal are at. My customers want the persona bar. They want to go to 9. They want the more streamlined interface. They understand that there's a few text boxes, right, that aren't great. They're even okay with the fact that they can't edit on a mobile device or a tablet right now, because they like the UI and the UX, and they find it is easier and makes DNN less intimidating. But a lot of these people are newer. They've seen the Evoke demos. They're like Matt, where they maybe had exposure to Evoke, and they're like, well, I don't want to have to ever go into this weird top thing again. So I think we really want to try to get something here and make sure that we're collecting a bigger, a bigger group of people with opinions, and especially, not to discount any of us here, but there's a lot of us here that have been around this community, for 10 plus years. We've seen the 5th incarnation of how we administer content in those 10 years. where there's some certain bias and difference here that I want to make sure is experienced amongst the greater group, rather than rather than it being just something that's inside of our group, but the people that are adopting.
For sure. But I mean, it's just one aspect of where it sits on the screen. There's there's also the aspect which hasn't been mentioned, I think, which is the whole permissions part. So in the old days, you used to be able to shift stuff around, determine permissions for various admin aspects of DNN. Now you can't anymore. So
sorry, Peter, you can, but there's no UI to set it up.
No, exactly. But I've seen it, and it kind of it kind of dismays me that there seems to be a second kind of solution to do the same thing that we used to do before. If you understand what I mean.
There is a persona bar for each persona bar menu item. There is a permission. There's a special persona bar permissions table, but it's currently not being used.
Right.
Okay. Maybe I'm not aiming at a short-term solution going one way or the other. I think
it would be a solution for DNN.
I would advise let's really think about on a user experience perspective and define something for DNN 10 or something like that. Because I think the experience that people have on the first experience with DNN is just with the persona bar or the edit bar or control bar. So it should work inviting two people to continue.
Yeah, I'd like to voice three things as well. First of all, I think everybody that's happy with the persona bar, of course, isn't voicing anything. So I think we're kind of course, those that are complaining are the ones we're hearing, but everybody that's happy, they're simply not saying anything. So, but that doesn't mean that there are so many people unhappy. It just means those are the only ones we're hearing. The second thing is I'm convinced no matter what we would present as an alternative, we would have at least the same amount of people complaining. And then the third thing I'd like to point out is one of the huge strengths of DNN for the content manager used to be all this in-page content editing. And I'd like to just re-emphasize this again, because for example, the way Too Sexy works is our customers don't even really ever work with the persona bar because they do everything in page. They have so little contact with those dialogues. And I think if more developers would focus back on just trying to optimize that experience, the question about the persona bar would also become less relevant.
Agree. If I look at the application that we make, that is not just generic website, but applications, there are very few users who have some kind of admin rights. All is done on the page itself instead of having a separate administration part in there. So I agree on that point. I would be happy probably to migrate or upgrade those kind of solutions to DNN 9. But for the normal experience ones, we have Evoke users, we have DNN users, we have all DNN users. It makes it, and I think we have to do a good research and good user experience investigation to see what's the best solution, or best, at least a better user experience solution than the current ones. Set apart the technical parts, Mitch, that you were talking about, the screen readers and so forth, and working on tablets and phone machines, because I think those technical items should be addressed, whatever kind of solution for the control panel persona bar we achieve. So that could be maybe a possibility for one version of 9.3, and let's please have a smaller group, maybe define what the possibilities are for DNN 10. If we look at, let's say, a good user experience, and maybe it's on the left side of the screen, preferably something that can be managed. So you put it on top or on the left, on the right, on the bottom side, but at least get something that has some kind of...
So there's one thing, and I agree we need to get a group set here, but there is one thing that we really need to be careful of here, that to be perfectly honest, DNN has not given a consideration to very much in the last 2 to 3 years. And that is, I'm all for change, but if we make another change and we move the persona bar to the top or to the right, and we break every single third-party skin that is out there, we're not going to have vendors around. So as much as we may dislike some of these aspects, if we break the ecosystem again, it's over. So I want to be constructive. I don't want to put arbitrary limitations on things here. But for the love of God, we have got to stop breaking the stuff that is in this community.
I don't think anyone's suggesting breaking stuff. I don't.
Or moving it from the left anywhere else will impact our skins. We've proven this with every change.
Yes, but if we add, for example, add the option for a skinner to define there's an area where you can pin this, and then it won't, it will reside in the skin at this place on the left-hand side, for example, without shifting anything, then of course it's a different situation like we currently have, and I really see this situation in a couple of skins where you always, when you log in, it displays and it shifts to the right, put something on the left, it doesn't really look nice. And we must provide the skinner with an option to prevent this happening, having a hover, or giving them him the chance to define the persona bar resides here.
Yeah, and we just have to be careful with that because that's a breaking change, right? We're catching a lot of flack, and I just want to. I'll leave it at this. I just want to make sure that we are understanding this, right? We've had the 9.2.0 release where people didn't take any breaking changes into consideration. We had the persona bar release where nobody took consideration into breaking changes. We have the 8X release that didn't do much. We had the 7X release that kind of talked about it. We have a history in the last 5 years of substantial breaking changes to module vendors, to skinners, to other people in the ecosystem, that if we continue that trend, the downward trend in this ecosystem that we have, I can imagine will continue.
The situation is different now, Mitch, because in the past 5 years, other people defined what changed over there, and we had no influence. So I hear you very clearly. Yes, we shouldn't break anything, seriously. But we have to rethink some of the decision that has been made before. We talked about that the DNN 9.2 should have been called 10. So people knew that things were breaking. We have defined new rules over there. It's much more clear. I saw some message from you this morning that if you're going to change something, we have to call it deprecated now and remove it in 11. So I think the situation for the community and the independent vendors and the independent solution providers are much better than in the past 5 years. But I agree, we have to be very careful in there. We have to continue support the community and people doing efforts over there. Agree.
And I could imagine that we can enhance the persona bar to work nicely with a specific skin, and giving the skinner an option to define in the future where the persona bar should reside. And that means it will work the same as before if the skinner doesn't do anything. But if he makes a specific place for it or implements a specific behavior, then it looks nicer in his skin, and that of course gives him a chance to be better than other skinners, of course. Yeah. That's my idea.
Yeah, and I think we just need to make sure that Ash and or Tomas, who wants to be in there, is in the subgroup that we get involved, because changes to the persona bar will impact, skin designers. They're going to impact us as we're maintaining the platform, and it is going to impact every Evoke feature that exists.
We don't have to solve it today. Let's take a year or something like that to improve it, and in the meantime improve the technical aspects that you mentioned before, and let's take a half a year or a year to see around what's coming along, because technology will improve, possibilities will improve, and don't make decisions too quickly. I agree on that.
All right, well, let's try to get a group organized, or we can take, one of these meetings, every other week or something, use this to help start to propel it forward. But I think we need to get a plan of an understanding of where and what the real community feedback is, what we need to resolve, and a pathway forward. And we need to also make sure that we're really careful in scoping the extent of this change. Remembering that we have to accomplish this goal with volunteer efforts.
Yeah, so there's a pull request out from ESW right now to add pinning to the persona bar so that it would hide in general but come out. I've just kind of been following it through email. I don't know if anyone's been looking at the specifics of how that works, how that affects themes, any of that.
I've not. I know there was also the one about getting the pain name back in for display, which has limited impacts to folks. So, but yeah, I think we need to keep an eye on it, and we need to make sure that we keep, ESW in the conversation here, because it's an area that they have a lot of contributions to that. So,
yeah. And in the chat, there's been a discussion about previous user experience research. We should probably see if that's available from DNN Corp or Will Morganwick or wherever to base the discussion of where we want to take this. At least have a starting place for why we are where we are.
Yeah, I think looks like David already made a post out there asking Will if he has it.
And I guess the other thing is it even realistic to talk about making the persona bar a configurable control panel and being able to switch something else out? Given that all the administration is persona bar extensions, like even if you had an alternative, it would still have to be a persona bar.
Right.
I think the setting still works. You can still switch out the control panel.
Right. You just don't have any admin experience anymore, because unfortunately, right, the control bar before was access and the admin experience were the modules. Now the persona bar is access and administration, which I think is the big thing that we have to keep in mind as well with anything that we look at doing. Because if we go and move it, that may be the case. Now we may be able to reuse those components in a different implementation, but that's something we'd have to figure out.
Oh yeah, one thing that hasn't sat comfortably for me with the current solution is that if you wanted to create an extra admin panel, you want to create a persona bar extension, you inherently rely on that persona bar being there. So it kind of means that the persona bar is the only way to kind of do the admin of DNN. There's no way to actually switch it out with another solution. Not unless someone leverages that same persona bar backend. And looking back, I think it could have been done more elegantly.
Yeah, well, and you can still swap it out. So you can actually enable the old control bars.
Right, but my persona bar extension won't be visible.
Right, exactly.
And as a developer, where I wanted to move towards was that, for instance, with a module, you could say, well, it has a site-wide, control panel like my DMX has, and that sits in the sidebar. Much as, for instance, Dave Lee, with who I had a lot of discussions about it, said, you run a store. Now, a store is also typically an app where you have portal-wide settings to manage, and logically those would go in a control, in that management interface, whether you call it a control bar, persona bar, or whatever. And I would love to, technically, I would like to see a way where, as a module developer, as a developer, you can say, okay, well, I have this panel and it sits with the main construction of the site, and it becomes visible, and that can become visible through method A or method B, depending on whatever the user prefers. And it could be made into something really minimal, like we do the spa module, just a blurb of HTML. It gets injected somewhere, and you handle everything through services. With the persona bar, we're probably 80% on the way of something like that. So I could see us kind of reworking that solution in that direction.
I would even go a little bit further in direction of liquid content to try to get common controls for types where you can simply do it declarative in your module definition, where you say in your manifest, where you say, okay, I have a settings page like this, it needs to inject like that, and it has this settings name and type and where it's being stored, and that would make it, of course, much easier in a later stage to migrate to a .NET Core version or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. It's that would be like the settings control, right? Which is picked up by DNN and then injected into the module settings interface.
Yeah, but being generated by DNN based on the declaration of settings you have. Of course, it will not fit for 100% of the settings, because if you have some dependencies, it's much more difficult, and there might be some controls we do not provide. But I think for 90% of the settings, it would be fine.
Yeah, I think so too.
It would make it much easier for module developers, because they just need to declare their settings, and they don't have to take care how to implement it, how it's being set up, because that's all handled by DNN. I think that would be the easiest way for any module developer.
Right. Another aspect of this discussion is that one of the original design goals as well of the persona bar was to become independent from the skin, which has always been an ongoing nightmare in the old days, if you remember, where if you had some admin module and someone, I don't know, threw Bootstrap into a skin or something, that could greatly upset whatever was happening in the admin modules. And now, because it's loaded in an iframe, all of a sudden you don't have that problem anymore. I think there is that goal to keep in mind as well, because I think that was a good goal in the end, and that kind of worked in the persona bar. So for that team as well to keep that in mind. And I know that Timo would like to be part of that group as well.
Me as well, as I have been on the old UI UX team, and I'd like to continue with him and the other guys, and any other one who wants to work on this, just to make it as usable as possible.
Just
and I think one thing, by the way, if you talk about persona bar, one thing which is still not being migrated is the digital asset management. So that's, of course, a subject we need to discuss in the near future, how we will deal with that, because it's currently just loaded in iframe, right? Or somehow injected, but it's the old module which is injected in the persona bar, so it's not client. It's somehow client side, but it's not the same technology, right, Peter?
No, I think it's the old module still there on the page.
Yeah, it just redirects to the page if you click
Yep.
that from the persona bar.
It's the only page really that still lives that's actually an admin page. That's definitely an undertaking, and I think that we're getting close to time. I don't want to take too much, but one of the things too that I think we really need to take a look at pathway wise is, if we want to make a big change, great, right? That's a 10x, 10x, 11x, 14x. I don't really care. But at what point do we as a community say, let's at least fix all of the crap that's broken to give people a good landing pad, right? The way that I look at the 9x release and or the 10x release is we need to give people a comfy place to rest for a while. while we make change, right? We have people that, to be perfectly honest, are in a crappy situation today by decisions that they didn't have a choice in. We have people that are making a conscious decision to stay on 8, to build new sites on 8 or earlier with known security vulnerabilities because they can't trust to come to 9. So as much as I would love to throw the baby out with the bathwater and fix all of these issues, there's a certain bit of me that says that as good stewards of an open source project, we really should work on truly stabilizing what's here. Even if we don't like the way that it interacts,
I'm
make
not
sure
sure
that the features are here.
I'm not sure anyone suggested that, Mitch.
I'm just keeping.
Yeah.
There's been some criticism in terms of the number of involvement and spinning gears and things like that, where there's some active, real stuff that's broken and missing. And I don't want to discourage anything from moving forward. I just want to make sure we remember that we have release dates coming up, right? We've got a code freeze date coming up Friday. We've got a code freeze date in 2 months, right? So if there's a way for us to try to figure out the new stuff, let's make sure that we also kind of find a way to fix the stuff that's out here today if we can while we're moving forward.
For sure.
Because we've got a lot of people in a lot of crazy places. And I'm like Sebastian, I've got a couple clients still on 5X due to odd reasons. One that was on 3X a couple weeks ago. It was fast. It was really fast.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. One of the reasons, or the main reason why I created TurboScript was a client with nearly 100,000 users who was on 4.9.5 for a long time, and then he wanted me to migrate up to 7.1. And while I was migrating the suggested upgrade path, on every step, the performance was just cut by half. And at the end of the and that's when I started my TurboScripts, and at the end it was about the same performance as on 4. So that means, of course, it's one of the subjects we need to address, and I'm glad, Oliver, that you want to take care of performance items on the persona bar. And I think we still have a lot of subjects on our agenda before we can address a migration to .NET Core.
Wanted to quickly follow up. I was wrong before about an ESW pull request. It is a community issue without any implementation yet, just discussing pinning the persona bar. And I put that link in the chat.
Yeah, I think we can make a whole bunch of people happy if we just have the option to say, okay, it doesn't scroll in, but rather it just is there. There's a hack going around the community to do it, of course, by disabling the JavaScript that does it. But I think it'd be probably not too difficult to implement something.
Yeah, or if you just can shrink it to an icon somewhere just in the left top corner or whatever, that would help a lot of people, because then it doesn't shift.
Oh, that's already going a lot further. I mean, this is just basically taking care of like the first irritation that has been voiced by so many people already, which is the fact that you have to wait for a second or two after page load, and then all of a sudden the page gets swashed because the bar comes out. And I find myself daily clicking on the wrong fucking thing on my screen because of this. And, you know, all it takes is a simple setting somewhere. Say, okay, well, I don't want that. Just leave it out.
Peter, out of curiosity, or for any of you guys that have had that experience, what kind of environments are you guys running in where you're seeing?
Slow ones.
Okay. Because all of our customer environments, the persona bar is fast. And we don't see any delays.
No, but I mean, if all your page content is just a blurb of HTML, of course, that page renders quite quickly. But if your page is more complex, like I'm talking about a site where I'm doing some heavy UI lifting on the client side.
Oh yeah, I mean we've got like 12 modules on a page and a bunch of other stuff, and we don't see that lag. So.
I see. You know, it's pretty, the moving in, but it's just it's pretty at first, and then after a few weeks, it starts to irritate because you're like, yeah, I know you're going to move in because I'm an admin.
Haven't also wasn't Ash? Didn't he mention from 9.0 to 9.1? I think they were kind of chasing the width of the how wide the persona bar should be because they need more real estate, and I think it was 9.2 where they added more width to it.
That was the first step, yeah. And I think there's still more area that needs to be done with that. There was the change in 9.2 that added. I think it went out like another 10% or something from the
tasks, or that was an evoke thing, but the evoke would anchor the task bar, which is your notifications, to the side of that.
Right.
But I mean, we could think of part of this is the this pinning thing is also, well, if you could pin it and control whether or not it comes out and in, or even does that, like I think Peter, you mentioned the automatic effect when you repost a page and then it comes back out. That's annoying.
Yeah.
But that could be part of this fix is also maybe it comes out over most of the page or all of it, just so you could see that you're still on the page and you can swipe it off. But does it really need to come halfway or 3/4? It could, you know what I mean? Like maybe just determine. For the most part, you probably just want the most real estate for your admin tools and then get it out of the way.
Yeah. It's like the Chrome panels when you go into Chrome and you start messing with the settings. They only come out so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically, actually, I mean, if you're just working on a site, just because you're an admin, you're often actually losing many valuable seconds just because the persona bar is actually bogging down your browser.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that is low-hanging fruit, and again, focusing on.
We are accepting pull requests. I will say that. So, if you guys want to fix that behavior, feel free to clone the latest repository and make some changes and submit a pull request.
Yeah.
For an incremental improvement, I think would be fantastic. Even if it ends up not being, the be-all, end-all solution along the way, at least, getting something out there to make it a little bit better performance-wise would be great. All right, anything else? As I said, I think we need to get a subgroup created to continue talking about this, to create an idea of an action plan and go from there. Is there anything else that we need to address today? All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time. We're approaching the end of the hour here. Great conversation. I think I think we've got some good action plans here. I'm excited to see what we end up coming up with.
Right. Thanks, Sean.